The whole concept here was just to kind of bring in ideas of different perspectives on trying to understand why the creation and understanding the creation is so important, right? The way you understand or perceive the creation and the fall of Adam and Eve has direct impact on how you view the world, how you view the gospel, how you view your faith and everything else. And that's why we have a series on the creation account to kind of give some more perspective and have more conversations on that, because we believe more conversations on that will lead to more ideas and hopefully more light and truth. And we accept our bias, obviously, from the Latter-day Saint perspective, but we throw that out there. People want to challenge it, ask questions, say it's garbage, whatever it is, but we are at least bringing something to the table for discussion.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, we're going to jump into it right here. So obviously, creation account day 2. We did day 1. We'll do a summary on some of the other episodes that we've done just to kind of catch up. But today is going to cover at the tail end Moses chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, and Genesis chapter 1, 6 through 8. And those who are not LDS, Moses, the book of Moses is what Joseph Smith translated. As he worked on the translation, God commanded him to do some translation work on the Bible, and that's where the book of Moses comes from. Real quick on the creation account on Moses, this is Moses chapter 1. Coming out of Joseph Smith's translation, there's a whole chapter before Genesis 1, right? And in there, Moses learns a few things. He learns the idea of being caught up into a spirit world. We kind of cover that. He speaks with God face to face. He learns that God is endless. God precedes this creation. Moses learns he's a son of God, right? So he's not just some creature that was made. That's a dog. There's a difference between Moses and the dog. The dog is a creation of his hands, but Moses is the son of God. Then he's also, the idea of the Savior is shared with him, because Moses is told he has a work, and in that work, it's in the similitude of his only begotten. We really focus on where Moses's eyes go. When he's caught up into heaven, he looks out. When he falls down to the earth and he talks to God, he looks up, showing that he's falling in between heaven and earth. He learns about a Savior. The definition of the word created is defined in there, and the word fell is falling back down to the earth. Then he also learns the idea that man is nothing. So with that being said, on the sections, the next chapters are verses 11 through 42. We learn that there's a spiritual world and a temporal world. Satan tempts Moses. Once again, we look at the vision where he looks up and down. The definition of made is included in there. I'm just doing some quick summaries. Moses asks a question to God. So the creation account is a result of questions. Moses asks questions and God responds to those questions in the form of the creation account. Another thing that we identify differently is the creation account is not a vision, right? A lot of people, even in the LDS church, they think that the creation account is a vision that's happening, but it is quite clear in the book of Moses that God is speaking and Moses is writing down what God speaks. So it's a narrative and Moses is copying it down as God tells him the story of the creation. We identify what's been coined as the godly creative pattern. That is make, right? God, whenever the term make it, well, let me do it this way. In the creation, whether it's in the Bible or in LDS scripture, there are the terms make, create, and form. And in our minds, we just think they're the same things, right? But because we have Moses chapter 1, we learn that make and create are specific terms for specific actions. And quickly, we say that make is what God speaks. God the Father speaks and authorizes this, that this is an acceptable thing to do and gives his approval. Once God makes it, God the Father makes it, then Jehovah or Jesus can create it. And create is tied to spiritual things. Whenever you see the term create in the Bible, that's a spiritual reality being created, not the physical world that we're in. Then there's the word form. Form is when a physical existence is made, right? Where the spirit is taken and put into the physical body, or to a physical existence. So that's the quick summary there. We'll skip through this. The main thing I wanted to highlight here is there's a reason why Moses chapter 1 went missing, and Moses was told why it would go missing. And it is because in a day when the children of men shall esteem my words as naught, and take many of them from the book which thou shalt write. So God even tells Moses, you're going to write this down, but one day in the future, people are going to take this out of the book. And this is kind of like what you mentioned earlier, Masi, with Deuteronomists. They were editing the Bible to fit their political and their religious preferences rather than just writing down what God told Moses, and other prophets as well. So that's kind of the whole point of this slide. This is day one. In day one, this earth, we talk about the specifics of that. We touch again on the dictation, that it was dictated to Moses. We talk about the beginning. The beginning doesn't mean the beginning of all things. It just means the beginning of this work or this idea in relation to Adam and Eve in this creation. We talk about the term created. We talk about the term void. We do spend some time talking about the Hebrew words, specific Hebrew words that are tied to this. We talk about the darkness and water, and how day one is not we take a more figurative interpretation. When it says darkness, it's not necessarily talking about darkness. It's representing confusion. Void means not being able to achieve a purpose. And the water means chaos, right? And then God is hovering over it, and he's seeing a problem. He sees a problem. He sends down light, which is a solution, and it's not creating anything spiritually or physically yet. This is just describing the chaos or the condition of the situation that's leading up to the creation, if it makes sense, Masi.
Okay. No, it does.
I'm just trying to cover some context before we get into it. On day one, this is the interpretation, right? The physical, or a diagram, if you want to call it. The water represents kind of like spirits, people, right? Or people, whether they're not necessarily spirits, but intelligences. And then the deep is representing something that is a secret or trying to be hidden. The darkness, which is kind of interesting because the darkness, God causes the darkness to come up. So darkness is usually referred to as evil, but in this situation, we take the interpretation and we follow the Hebrew words that give us this idea. But the darkness means ignorance. God is causing the darkness to come over the deep, which is a secret combination. So the darkness covers it so that the intelligences or other spirits from other quote unquote creations, they're not hidden in this ignorance, but the Spirit of God that he sends down, they can see it easier and they can respond to it. And then after he sends down the light, he separates the light that is good, those who are responsive to God's Spirit, and then those who are in the dark or in the deep, who aren't responsive to God's Spirit and light, they remain in this realm of ignorance to what God's will is, or what his plan that he's going to do, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay. So now we're going to jump into, I know we covered a lot. I'm just trying to give a little bit of context. If you want to go back, we do have a playlist on YouTube and other series that talk about it. Go ahead, Masi.
So to go back to that last graph here, so you're saying, so there's deep and deep
Yes.
darkness night. This is where you're saying that the what is it, the people that don't understand God's will and that are
Yes.
the deep, they're ignorant. That's what you mean? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the it's called the tohu vavohu in Hebrew. And what it represents, it is a deep and a hidden, and it's chaotic, right? And there's
Okay.
a problem. And the deep, to me, the deep means something that is trying to hide from God,
Mm,
right? Something, a secret combination. And you get some of these ideas even through Cain and Abel,
mm,
right? So Cain, after he kills Abel,
Abel.
tries to lie to God, but then God says, I know what you did. Your brother's blood cries to me from the ground. And you know what Cain says? I now know that these things are not hidden from God the Father,
Mm,
right? Because Cain did this because he did a secret combination with Lucifer, with Satan, where
mm,
Satan said, you follow me, I'll deliver your brother to you. You kill him, but you will promise to follow me, what I say.
mm.
And so to me, after God tells Cain, hey, I know what you did, Cain realizes, oh, I thought my little secret with Lucifer
Lucifer will be able
was
to hide
hidden,
it.
but
Yeah.
now he knows, oh, God knows that. That is similar to what I'm saying. What happened in the creation account on day one is there was a secret combination going on, and God knew it because he's God. That's why there's certain things, like when it says here, God's spirit, he says, my spirit hovered over the waters. And then
Mm-hmm.
he says, because I am God. And what does that mean to me? That means his spirit went into this area, the water or the deep, which represents beings, and knows that this secret combination is going on. And he says, okay, but this is where it gets interesting, Masi. He doesn't go and eliminate the darkness and say, get out of here. What does he do?
Yeah.
He just separates them, night and day.
Okay.
But it's not night and day as we see with physical light. We'll get to that later. This is just saying the light is good. You get a certain reward. The dark is bad. You get a different reward. It's like different glories. And then you're assigned to that, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Here's a Wada Bears question, kind of off topic, but it's crazy to think that there are over 200 flood stories of Noah from different countries and cultures. Yes, and there's many endless stories of creation accounts on how the world came to existence, even in Polynesia. So these ideas are not just in the Bible, there are throughout the different civilizations, Wada Bears. I don't know if that answers your question, Masi, but that's the response there.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to go through verse by verse and kind of talk through it on day two. So around here on the left, if you want to read the King James version, Masi,
Okay.
and then also we'll stop there. And then what I've done on the Moses side is side by side the verses, and then I've highlighted the differences. If you want to read those
That's
two
good.
verses, and then we'll go from
Gotcha.
there.
All right. So this is Genesis chapter 1, verse 6, King
Yeah.
James Version. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Okay. And then Moses chapter 2, verse 6, pearl of great price. And again, God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the water. And it was so, even as I spake, and I said, let it divide the waters from the waters. And it was done.
Okay. So
Hmm, pretty interesting.
couple things I highlight, and this is it. And let me just go back. Okay, so it looks like I had other slides that go into detail, and I was like, that's too many slides. I'm just going to have to speak to it verbally. So just so everybody remembers, there's the King James Version. The Pearl of Great Price, or the Book of Moses, is Joseph's translation of those verses. And I highlighted Here's the thing, Masi. The only day that has this term "and again" is on day 2. And it is very important. And here's our favorite phrase, because why? When you have to do something again, what does that mean? When you have to say something, it says, "And again, I, God, said." When you have to repeat yourself, what does that usually mean? When you're talking to kids or to
somebody
your
didn't
friends?
listen. Yes, somebody didn't listen and didn't
Yes.
or ignored your first instruction.
Yes.
I don't know. That's what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
that's what I'm that and that's very important, because that's why we say this day 1 is not the creative process stopped, because God said in the beginning, I created the heaven and the earth. And then before he gets into day 1 is the creative process stopped for a second. And that's why we take a figurative description. And why does it stop? Because he recognizes there's chaos going in the deep, and the creative process has to stop. After he said, "This is what we're going to do," and then he finds out, wait a second, they're not going to follow what I said to do, or if we keep things the way they are, what I said to do to be accomplished, it won't come to pass. That's why the term void. The earth was without form and void. Void means it will not come to pass. So he says without form and void. So this is why we take a more figurative approach to this on day 1. And then after the Lord's Spirit goes over, hovers over the deep, he separates the darkness, the night and the day, the good and the bad. Then the very next verse says, "And again, I, God, said," which is basically saying, okay, we figured out the game plan. We're going to continue now with the creation process. Okay. And then it says, like you said earlier, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the water. And it was so, even as I spake, let it divide the waters from the waters. And it was done." Now, my question is, why do the waters need to be divided? And literally, Masi, this literally just came to my mind as we're having this conversation. Because we're doing a division here.
That's what I was thinking. From the water, from the deep water, from the, I guess, the lighter water.
Yes. And the lighter is the more obedient, or the higher, and then the lower water is the less obedient.
What is firmament, Dua? What is that?
Yes. So the term firmament, I can't remember. I think it's raka, or no, I can't remember the term for it. But what it is the Hebrew term is the same term that you use when you hit metal and create a sheet, like a shield. Okay. Like, let's say you start with a brick of metal, and then you hit it and you thin it out. So to me, what that is representing is there is a separation between the two waters. The waters below cannot go to the waters above, but the waters above, who are more righteous, can have the capacity to go down to the waters below. So it's a separation of realms. And so there is, and we'll see later, as we go through the creation account on day 2, the lower waters are more associated with the physical world, and the upper waters are more with the spiritual world. And we'll get to that. But that's where the term firmament is. It is a somewhat physical, but not necessarily thick and dense, but it's a type of separation that has an element of physicality, but not fully physical as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think here's a couple things, a couple comment. Lower waters is less obedient, which is why Satan is known to be and that's a fair point. Fair point, right? The lower
Mm.
waters of a lower realm, Satan has more control. Here's a really good, interesting comment from Tavi. Could be the firmament be a form? Yes, it is some form of separation or a veil. I would be open to that idea, Tavi, that the firmament is a veil, so to speak.
Okay.
So we'll jump right into it. If you want to read
Is the next one, right?
the next one, please.
All right. So, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So this is the Pearl Gate Price version. Moses. And I, God, made the firmament and divided it the water, yea, the great waters under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so, even as I spake.
Okay. So I got a little distracted and got ahead of myself. But the one thing I do highlight here is in Joseph Smith's translation, there's always the term I, right?
Yes.
And I said, and I spake. And this is
Making it
important because God is speaking
correct.
to
It's making it
Moses.
more personable, like he's actually
Yes,
in the
he's a
midst of
person.
creating.
Yes.
Yes.
So it makes God more personable. And it also is saying, I'm the one speaking. I'm speaking to you, Moses. This is what I did. This is what
Yeah.
I said.
Mhm.
No different if you're sitting with someone face to face and telling them a story. Oh, and this
Correct.
is what I did, and this is what I said.
While the King, and that's what I've noticed, right? The King James version is more of making it such as it was somebody acting on the request of God or something. Like
Yes,
it's like it's a little bit beyond. You
it's
can't
not a
comprehend.
first-hand experience. It's not a first-hand account. It's like someone heard a story of someone's story, and that's what happened.
Okay.
Right? And here's the thing. And I, God, made the firmament. This comes
Mhm.
back to the creative pattern. God the Father authorizes that the firmament should be made. I am agreeing that a veil, if you want to use Tavi's thing, a veil or some type of separation between the
Mm,
waters above and the waters below. Another
mm,
interesting thing here is, and this becomes critical, Joseph Smith, this kind of information, this is one of the reasons why I don't believe Joseph Smith made this up, because he says, yea, the great waters.
mm.
This becomes very important because the name of the waters below changes from the waters above. So right now, let me see if I'll skip. This becomes a very important conceptual thing to understand. We start with waters overall, right? And there's a great deep inside. Then
Mhm.
the firmament is made and it divides the waters above from the waters below. But then he names the waters below as the great waters.
Interesting.
So what that does now is, this is very important, because what happens is you're going to see he's going to say, I did something and they were in the waters. What's the only place that is still called waters?
The above.
Above. And he will always say, I created the fish in the waters above. And the word created is spiritual. And you will
Mm.
notice the created is always up here at the waters, and the formed always happens down here. So the naming of this is actually very, very important. Does that make sense? Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, I do have a question. I'm just like thinking in my mind, why name it the great waters below? I would think I would have it reverse. The great waters
That's a fair
above
point.
and the waters below. I don't know. I don't know if you could help me try to understand that.
I don't have
Why?
a good answer for that, Masi.
Okay.
I really don't. Maybe it's because the waters below, it's saying there's more chaos, there's more danger, but wherever
Okay.
there's more danger and chaos, what's also there? More opportunity,
Okay.
more growth. Because
Okay.
remember, right here, you can stay in the spiritual realm, but it has limitations.
Okay.
Everything's perfect, nobody dies, nobody blah blah blah. But when you come down to the below, there's more danger, but there's more opportunity. I don't know. That's my best
Okay.
answer, but that's more of a on the cuff response. But I don't really
Mm.
have a good answer for that. All I
Okay.
know is that's what God calls it, the great waters. But the name will
Yeah.
change again.
Okay.
We will see that the name will change again.
Okay.
So
This is the
let's
next one.
see here.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
let's
so
read
the
that.
great waters under the firmament, even as I spake. See, and it says, and it was so even as I spake. So he made it, right? So right
Yes.
now he's made the firmament. And let's read this.
Okay, so this is the King James version. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And this is the Moses chapter 2 verse 8. And I, God, called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day.
All
The
right.
only difference is just the I.
All
That's
right.
all it
That's
is,
the
just
only
to
thing
make
that
it
changed.
personable.
Make it more personal.
Mm,
Okay, so this is a what shows that, right? This is
yeah.
the second day. So we start with water, water's above, water's below, and the firmament. The thing I need to change here actually is you can actually call this heaven now, but that's after the fact.
Mm,
So that's what this diagram shows is what has happened in the naming so far.
okay.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so real quick in summary, because it's only day 2. Day 1 is a um, not a literal interpretation of a creation act. This is more uh, an interpretation that it's a description of the state of the beings before, because there's a stop in the creative process. Day 1 is describing what God has to do. He has to almost like make an audible, because before day 1, he created the heaven and the earth. Then before day 1 ends, he has to go and separate. He has to first observe what's going on in the deep and in the face of the water. Then he separates the night and the day and the light and the darkness. And then after he does that, then he says, and again, then he has to do this separation of waters here. And we're going to see, and that's the last slide. I debated adding day 3 into
Mm,
this
mm,
because we're going to start to see that in day 3, when animals and stuff are created, made
yeah.
and created, they're assigned to specific locations. And understanding how the waters have been divided and named is very important to understanding what's going on, especially when you're paying attention to when God says, I made something and I created something. And where those things are created is important. And a sneak peek is created things go up here, formed things end up down here. And that heaven is like the middle of what the waters in the spiritual world is and the physical waters in the world in the physical world.
Okay.
But that's pretty much it for day 2. That's the quick
Mm,
summary. Day 3, we're going to start seeing,
the
you
plants and
know,
animals.
well, we're going to see a separation down here
Okay.
in the great waters, because
Okay.
the great waters are going to be gathered to one side and land is told to come up, and then the land is called earth,
Okay.
and the great waters is called sea. We're going to see um a lot of different things. Maybe it's worthwhile for me to pull up some of the figures just to kind of give a sneak peek. But any questions on that, Masi?
No, no. I'm just yeah. I was just curious about that with the great waters. I don't know. For some reason, I would just view that as a more but when you said that it's like opportunity, it makes sense. For some reason, I attach the great waters as a more positive thing or a great of I don't know for something more positive. That's why I thought it made sense if it was reversible for some reason. But not only that,
Yeah,
but there is some. It's pretty cool, and that's another testament of why Joseph Smith's translation, he didn't make it up. It's definitely true because look how personable and more accurate he adds in the in the Moses filling in with the King James or the Bible's version of the creation. So it's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. So here's some of the other things, right? And I'm just kind of giving this to. I feel like we're kind of leaving people a little hanging a little bit too much, but we'll get
Okay.
into the details. But here's another thing that shows it, right? You start on day one, figurative. Day two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Day two here, the great waters. Looks like I may have mislabeled this, but then you see there's a separation. The great waters to one side, the earth comes up,
Mm.
right? And then on day three, the waters, if you notice, the top hasn't changed its
Yeah.
names,
Stay the same.
right? So it goes from firmament to heaven, heaven. Then, it goes gray waters. Sorry, it goes from here to here, the great waters to one side, the dry land on one side. Then it's named sea. The great waters
Mm.
is now changed to sea, and the dry land is now earth.
Earth.
Okay. So with that, and we'll go through the verses that touch that, and then let me see. Um, Here's another interesting one. Um, Here. So firmament of heaven, right? So the sea, the earth, in the firmament of heaven is where the sun, moon, and stars are placed,
Okay.
right? And then the waters, which are above the firmament, is still above the sun,
Mm.
moon, and stars.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
that's another interesting thing that goes on, and we'll get into the details of that. Um, Let me see. Let me go into day last one here, day 5. Let me see this one. That seems to be a repeat. Let's go day 6. Yeah. Okay. We'll do this last one as the last preview. So, spiritual spheres, firmament of heaven and the waters. So, this is something that's interesting, and I'll just kind of make this as a comment. God creates the birds, right? And they fly in the firmament of heaven, but then says that they will fill the earth and fly in the air.
Hmm.
So the difference is when they're created spiritually, they come out of the waters, they fly in the heavens, but when they come down to the earth, they don't fly in the heavens anymore. They fly in the
Earth.
air. No, in the air, which is
Oh, in
more
the
of a
air.
physical relate a comment. But we'll get into that, like the scriptures. We're going to go into when something's made and created and where the scripture says they reside. And the main areas that we're going to focus on is when God creates them, are they in the waters? Are they in the earth, in the sea? And kind of talk through that.
Mm.
And then we're going to identify where everything is happening before we get to Moses chapter 3 or Genesis chapter 2 when the physical formation actually happens.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes, but I think that's it. Looks like we have a question/comment here. Hi, Jesse. Appreciate it. Jesse, we're friends from our Provo days.
Gotcha.
But she says, Mary, maybe positivity and wording is all of the flesh. Spirituality is simple. I think that's why it's kept simple to just
Mm.
waters. It could be, right?
Mm.
Simplify it that that's not as complex or chaotic.
Mm.
But that's a interesting comment there, Jesse. Any thoughts on
Okay.
that, Mussy?
No, no, no. Thanks for that add into that, Jesse. Appreciate that. Thank you.
So I think with that being said, Mussy, that's the end of the show. We're coming up
Nice.
on 2 hours. Any closing thoughts?
No, very interesting. I enjoyed this episode. It's always good to talk about the spiritual side and just I think these are just good topics to talk about, especially when it talks to not just understanding your faith more. I think these episodes are good. It makes you defend and understand your faith and then maybe ask critical questions. um as a self-reflection and just what other people think of the LDS faith and just Christianity or
In
religion
general.
in
Yeah.
general. So I enjoyed this episode, Tua. Thank you very much for bringing this, to the platforms that we can discuss. And not only that, we had a good contribution and people asking good questions during this um, topic of religion topic. So it was very probably one of the best ones we've had interactions with compared to the past. So appreciate everyone's following and being involved. Thank you very much, Tua. Malo.
Mahalo. Appreciate it as well. I follow up with Masi. Appreciate all the viewers and the listeners. Like you said, Masi, pleasantly surprised, right? Sometimes
Mm,
we know some of our viewers, we agree on history and culture and stuff. They don't always agree with our spiritual or religious positions. But it's, as we all know, and as we say, this is the beauty of the Kava experience, the Kava circle experience. This is why, you know, Polynesians have been, in my opinion, living the podcast concept for thousands
mm,
of years, because the Kava bowl and the Kava gathering is where politics, religion, social, academic things were discussed by our ancestors for thousands of years.
mm,
And those things are important because it allows us to understand the world around us. It helps us understand how we fit in the world and gives us the opportunity to ask questions and to grow mentally, spiritually, emotionally, academically, politically, literally across the board. But we thank everyone for joining us. Oh Yahweh, Moe is definitely pushing the Tuitonga Empire forever.
mm.
The red wave, the red
Malo
wave.
boy.
So
Malo
Malo
boy.
Moe. But with that being said, as always, we invite everyone, stay curious, be bold, and ask those questions, and don't be
Yeah.
afraid to seek after the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not always saying the truth is not always fun, right? Sometimes
Mm,
it's great to be like, oh, yeah, this idea has some good points, but the truth can also be painful. And that's a good thing, because maybe you need to learn and grow somewhere, whether it's with the family, with your church, with your community, um, or in your personal life. But those are good things. So keep asking the questions, be bold, and until next time, peace.
peace. Oh.